Okay, should be good to go.
Well, sure. Yeah, good afternoon. It's August 26th, about 12:03 p.m. This is a meeting of the Hawaii Hemp Task Force. My name is Gail Byrne-Baber. I'm the chair. And before we jump into what's on the agenda today, I'm going to hand it back to DOA per usual to ask you to do walk us through the opportunities for the public to join in and also a roll call. So thank you.
My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm IT for Department of Agriculture. For internet, telephone, and in-person access, when testifying, you'll be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 2 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If internet and phone connection is lost, the meeting may reconvene when either audiovisual communication or audio-only communication is established within 30 minutes. The public may access the reconvened meeting by clicking the link in the agenda or calling one of the members provided above. If it's not possible to reconvene the meeting within 30 minutes after an interruption, then check the agency's website for information as to whether the meeting will be continued to an alternative date and time, or the meeting may be terminated. For those of you joining via internet, as an attendee, your microphone may be automatically muted during the meeting unless you are providing testimony. For each agenda item you wish to testify on, please click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. The task force staff will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the task force meeting facilitator, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you're finished speaking in order to prevent audio feedback. For any members of the public joining by phone, when the task force meeting facilitator asks for the public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. After entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the meeting facilitator, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on the phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you are finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take the roll call. So I'm requesting all task force members to please acknowledge and say present when your name is called. So first, Gail Byrne-Baber of Hawaii Royal Hemp.
Present.
Robert Benz of Hawaii Sustainable Farm.
Present.
Tai Chang of Hampshire, Hawaii.
I'm here, present.
Jared Gamuni of Hawaiian Choice.
Present.
Janine Austin of Maui Majesty. Janine. Gloria Ilagan of Mauna Kea Trading. Gloria. Not there. Kelly King of Pacific Biodiesel. Kelly King. Not here. Professor Lee of University of Hawaii at Manoa.
Present.
Kyle Young.
Present.
Michele Matsuda of Kulele. Michele.
Present.
Judaya McRoberts of Kauai Hemp Co. Judaya here. Liliana Napoleon of Napoleon Gentry. Liliana. Not here. Brittany Neal of Hawaiian Hampstead.
Present.
Grant Alberton of Archipelago.
Present.
Greg Smith of Earth Matters.
Present.
Joseph Smith. Hemp Home Hawaii. Joe? Not here. Rusty Top, Kamina Ventures. Rusty, I'm not here. Scotty Wong, Ohana Ventures.
Present.
Okay. So we,
Also, Mitchell Nakata joined, just, or Michelle, is it Michelle? Sorry.
you can.
Oh, wait, no, second.
Michelle, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Michelle, Kata, and this is from DOH.
Oh, I see, sorry.
So here we have the quorum.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate that. Well, the agenda that's been publicized says we're going to be discussing the Hemp Task Force report. And we spent a lot of time on Friday going over what we felt were key findings and things that needed to be in the report, as well as recommendations. I got a number of folks sent me things yesterday afternoon, so I'm now going through that and organizing the recommendations and the findings. And what I'm not attached to anything. Whatever direction the task force thinks is best to take today, we can do that. I'm just going to throw out there for consideration is that we go back and see if there's anything else in terms of big picture considerations that affects all the sectors that we want to identify, and if there's any recommendations that fall for that, and then potentially look at the building sector to see if there's anything in particular folks involved in the building sector want to make sure that are in there. I've definitely got the consultant's initial report and can pull things from that, but there may have been, as there were in other sectors, things that were missed or misattributed that we want to clean up or add to. So that's my suggestion for now. But happy, I mean, we're making this up as we go, so to speak. So is there any feedback or other ideas on how we might want to progress today?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, it's a evolving work in progress, so everyone just chime in as we need. So the first thing I was thinking about was visiting any larger overarching issues that affect all sectors. We talked a bit about banking, and one of the things we didn't get into in too much detail was insurance. That's affected us all. We obviously see an impact, but if there's specific recommendations around insurance, I'd love to visit that. And then I see, Greg, you have your hand up. You have something? Go ahead.
I just had a question. I was wondering how, if Hawaii becomes recreational, how that will affect what we're trying to do today here at putting this hemp program together. Do you think it's going to make any difference?
Well, I mean, you're asking our opinions.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I get a different opinion from everyone, probably in the Zoom call, including, the AGs and DOH might have their own opinion. You have to excuse me. I have an older cat in the background that's making some noise. I would say for the vast majority of what we're doing, no, because it's the only place where there may be some bleed over influence from my perspective would be more in the cannabinoid sector. I think the only, for some reason we got thrown under the Cannabis Commission. I think a lot of us had thoughts about that, but these other sectors, aren't necessarily influenced by that. Go ahead, Robert. You probably have some other thoughts on that.
I was just gonna wait my turn. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, did you want to comment on Greg's curious whether what we're doing today might be impacted by whether we go rec or not? I think we're tasked with the landscape that we have right now. We can certainly look down the road and see if there's, some contingency recommendations or policy recommendations we want to make if we think that's
Right. I like the idea of saying positive and hoping that it won't. I know that I was told, I won't say who told me, but some very high person in the state said that if it passes, it might kind of negate what we're doing here, but I want to be pessimistic and stay positive and hope it won't. I think the best way that the state could move forward, and the governor even mentioned it, is just expanding the medicinal program to the point that pretty much everybody could use it as an adult use program, because it is one of those things. I heard a recent study that it can even protect against aging. So everybody needs some of that. So even if people would call it all medicinal on a federal level, um, it would protect us a lot more, because the federal descheduling is, and all other work is gonna make it more legal, or more easy for us to keep our financial um services, which everyone is mostly concerned about, I guess, on the recreational bill. So if we went that way on the state, uh, I know we don't really have too much input on that matter, but um, going with what is federally recognized would help us. On the impact, it would definitely not be only to the CB. It would be to all sectors. Um, if that moved in, I know that they say that they selectively, but even as I was going to point out, right now the movement reports and the buffer zone apply, even if I was going to cut a field before it went to flower, which really isn't going to be profitable for the farmer on other reasons, but um, those still would be in, even if they wrote it to just exclude the industry, as we've seen, you can't really rely on the state to do that. So I just I hope it all works out.
Well, point of clarification, obviously, we're tasked with a hemp report now, given where we're at, but Robert, I'm a little bit, it sounds like maybe we need to prepare some contingency recommendations, because whatever the source or whoever the source was saying, if there's some kind of movement in towards rec, that our report would be mute. I guess I don't understand why that would be the case. I mean, like someone's going to pass some legislation saying that this report shouldn't be listened to, or what?
Yeah, exactly. Nothing formal is that. I think it was more that as SB 3355 was gonna kind of wipe out all of previous work. That kind of speculation.
So, I guess that's a recommendation potentially we could have then, is that the hemp industry reports and wishes don't get to be unilaterally dismissed through future legislation, because then we're just back at where we're at, which is this constant regulatory flux. Okay, go ahead, Brittany.
It seems like any way that we could try to put some sort of recommendation in the report, basically saying what you just said as far as not undoing the progress that we've made. But I think that ultimately, regardless of what happens at the state level, unless federally cannabis is descheduled, descheduled or rescheduled, it seems like it's going to pose issues again between the disconnect on what's happening federally with the law and in the state with regards to recreational and medical cannabis. And so I think it's very important that we continue to remain a distinct program that adheres to federal law as it's evolving, rather than be kind of pushed off track by whatever happens in the high THC cannabis realm.
Thanks, Brittany. I think one of the things that makes Hawaii a little bit unique too is that we have crossover amongst this people that are in the industry. We have cannabinoid farmers that are microgreen farmers. We have cannabinoid farmers that also grow for fiber and want to have a small fiber business. So we might be a little bit, I think Hawaii often is very different and unique when you're looking at agricultural regulations and even healthcare regulations. So I think that it's fair for us to say, regardless of what policymakers think has worked well in other states, we can put forward what we think makes sense here. Sounds like a recommendation there. Go ahead, Robert.
Sorry, after you finished the recommendation, that's probably better to stay focused on right now. I just had a comment on the original question about the insurance.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, well, let me, do I hear that there's basically a recommendation? First of all, we'd already talked about one of the overarching issues being this regulatory flux. One of the recommendations, or several that came in this Sunday, was that that needs to be addressed. We need some assurances. And one individual suggested that the state could even produce a letter that says, we're not going to be messing with the hemp industry for 2 years. So we might be able to go out and get some kind of investment. What was your comment on insurance? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there, Robert.
The DCCA of the state, it has the Hawaii Insurance Division that oversees the Hawaii insurance industry. I was thinking, because we have such a big deadline, if there's a way we have our kind of results in our official report, but if we could continue and then we could meet as a task force with like the Hawaii Insurance Division to help craft language that would be most effective in achieving our results and a robust hemp industry for the state. But in this time, I guess we could make that more vague, but include the Hawaii Insurance Division as.
Okay, so the recommendation you'd like to see is that, well, 2 parts. I think it's also been suggested by a number of other people that we continue the task force, and that one of the items that they would be taking up is a conversation with the Hawaii Insurance Division of the DCCA to see what we can do to provide greater coverage for, or more stable coverage for hemp farmers. Is that about right?
Correct. I don't know if I need to make a official motion or if I should do it later to have because we have our August 30th deadline. We get our report we're working on now by that date, but we continue the task force and meet with other experts. That way you could get more detailed report to legislature.
I don't think you need to make a motion right now, in terms of like identifying recommendations that the task force would like to go forward. And obviously, as we're discussing this, is there something that someone else on the task force has a diametrically opposed set of data or information that might inform a recommendation? It'd be good to, bring that up in the moment so that we can have that to consider as a group, as opposed to me having to resolve two contrary recommendations, which I wouldn't do. I would bring back to the group. So far, everything seems to be aligned, but just throwing that out there for folks. So Robert, I guess back to your question or point, I don't think we need if you want to ask one of the AGs, you can, but we haven't done motions for any of the other recommendations.
Awesome. Right. Yeah, that's fine. Perfect.
You know, one of the things I'd like clarification on is, I think there is a role and a need for continuing the hemp task force. How often we meet, I think is something we need to consider. And then of course, I think there probably needs to be subcommittees of that. Probably a building sector committee that's heavily weighted with folks that are expertise and that, and then potentially a subcommittee for other sectors, if or as need be. So I don't know if we need to just leave it as a broad task force recommendation, or should we include at this point the inclusion of subcommittees? I know that was something that was in the report. They didn't call them subcommittees. I think they had standalone task force for the different sectors, but because we have such overlap within our state, kind of seems, I think in some ways it'd be nice to have a body in which all the sectors were meeting, and then there could be individual subcommittees that meet, but that's just my idea. Are there any other thoughts out there on how to continue the momentum that we have without exhausting everyone? Hi, Robert, go ahead.
I like that idea, and anybody that is interested, that's a farmer in one of those specific committees or topic areas can attend, and we can bring in experts on the various topics if we have it set up like this is going to be the topic of this meeting.
That sounds good. So kind of going back a minute to the legislation, in the uncertainty that brings up, and I don't know whether we're facing another rec bill or not, that's gonna try to move hemp under there. Are we in so it seems like everyone's in agreement that this regulatory flux has absolutely impacted investment, impacted all of us significantly. And then at the same time, we're also proposing recommendations that would require some legislation. So, and that's great. The challenge, I'm going to have to go tend to this animal. So you guys, I'm going to take a 60-second break. I apologize. So June, if you want to take over for a minute, if you want to talk amongst yourselves, but for me, it's distracting. I don't know if you can hear it, but I need to just go care for this animal quickly, and I'll be right back. My apologies.
We can just wait for Gail, because we don't want her to miss what someone says.
Okay, thank you for your patience. I don't know if you were doing things while I was gone or not, but I see Brittany's hand up. Go ahead.
So I realize that some of the things that we want to accomplish, probably the only way to truly bring that about is through legislation. But for each of the recommendations we have, if anybody has creative ways to think of ways we can bring about the impact that we want without having to go through additional legislation, then please suggest these alternate routes, because that might be a way that, if at all possible, anywhere, we can reduce some of the legislation that we're saying, hey, there's too much, but also make some of the key changes that would advance the industry. So not sure how to find that balance, but if there's any way that some of these things don't require legislation and we could still address them, that would be great. But I'm not sure if that is truly possible anywhere.
Yeah, and part of the issue has been almost the flux is almost caused by additional more stringent regulations or changes that would impact a business structure. So certain legislation may not, like access to banking, things like that. That could be perceived in a good light. The challenge is whenever you introduce legislation, you can end up with gut and replace. You know, you never know what's going to come out of conference. So we may have a you know, it's something that looks really great for banking and insurance. Let's just use that as an example. And then we come out, all of a sudden we're under a cannabis commission. You know, I mean, it's a little facetious and I apologize for being facetious, but I think we've all witnessed that, whether it's in hemp or some other industry. So I appreciate you putting out there the question, how can we achieve our objectives without legislation? I personally don't know on some of these. Go ahead, Robert, you have your hand up.
That is a great question, and I can think of maybe ideas that we could talk about here. I'm not sure if they're actually effective, but we do. I think Andrew is on the task force or on the Zoom here. He probably has an idea if the AG is working on a cannabis bill that might impact the hemp. And the last one was so long, it was hard to even find the hemp. Um, I guess um, that would be one way, like as mentioned in previous meetings, more of an open dialogue between the industry and the HDOH. If there was a way to have the hemp industry be the one that gets this final say, but I think that might be just a very optimistic goal. I don't think that would let us do that, but us having that say would be good. The gut and replace that you mentioned is really a very big issue. I guess I'm not sure if we're gonna be involved in this new what is called like the Hawaii Farm Bill, if there's a way to write that so that it's not as easily capable of gut and replace, because gut and replace is pretty scary, and then just like you said, just a one word change or something can also be pretty scary. So um,
That's a good
beyond
question.
more communication, I don't have too much ideas.
That's a great question. We can ask Chair Hurd. We can also ask folks of, I know Senator Richard's been involved in looking into agricultural bills, so we can definitely ask them what kind of role hemp might play in there before the next meeting. Ty, you have your hand up. Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. I just wanted to, everyone has some great comments, I think, about future legislative session, but I just wanted to bring us back to the report itself. And I think we have like less than a week now, or, these 5 days to get this report finalized. I just wanted to ask, is there specific headings under the recommendations that we're working under right now? And if we do have those headings, could we circulate that so that we can just start to organize the different ideas? I know we've heard about cannabinoids and farming last week and insurance. And I think we're going to raise industrial materials and building today. But yeah, if we could just get those out, I think we still have to vote as a task force about which of those recommendations really get included in the report and get finalized. So I think we would want to be doing that, at the latest by Wednesday in the next couple of days.
Yeah. What I prefer to do is actually cut this meeting short so I can just get writing, because my goal would be to have something to you guys by Wednesday morning, if not sooner, with all the recommendations that I've heard, and then culling through the consultant's report. And it would be by sector, findings and recommendations by sector that are already in the report. So it'd be fiber, building.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, energy and food and cannabinoid. And I've gotten comments on almost all the sections. Well, if we want to move past speculation on future legislation, I think it is important that we find a way that provide that stability for ourselves. And it was the intention of the Hemp Task Force to have the open dialogue with the agencies. I know because we were part of those discussions on what, you know, the bill that created this act. It was to have the opportunity to talk openly with agencies about that instead of being what we feel is blindsided. But, oh, go ahead, Brittany.
I'm just wondering, since we have, you know, representatives from Department of Ag and Department of Health, and the Attorney General's office here right now, as far as I'm aware, can we just ask the question, like, do we need to legislate that we have monthly meetings to discuss hemp, or is it something that they can just say, yeah, we can fit that in, and let's just schedule a monthly call to talk about hemp, and everybody can bring concerns to the table, and we can have these conversations of where do we meet each other in the middle to make sure all of our needs are met. So is that something that we can just ask the agencies, or does it actually have to be legislated that they have to be forced into meeting with us? Because it seems like it would be great for everyone if we could just continue the conversation.
I don't know. I know, and I'm sure someone will have a comment on this. I know I was able to have stakeholder groups independent of legislation when I worked for the state, but I don't, you know, but a lot of that has to do with your workload, right? And your boss and the support of your boss. But yeah, let's ask them. And after we get that question answered, let's try to take no more than 15-20 minutes on wrapping up this legislative piece and the Hemp Task Force piece. And then we can move on to building sector recommendations. Because I want to make sure I at least capture verbally if there's anything else out there. And if not, we can go back to, so Brittany's question was to DOH, DOA, and the AG. Do you guys have the capacity to meet informally with us?
Hi, Gail. Thanks, Brittany. It's Liam Gibbon from the Department of Health, Office of Medical Camps Control and Regulation. We would like to meet, and we've always been open about meeting with the industry on a regular basis. I've tried to meet with you guys when you guys have your meetings. We would prefer that as opposed to having another task force. I think we've all seen the issues with task forces and sunshine laws and trying to get a quorum and then getting a room and then getting notes and everything. So we'd be open to having a meeting, say, quarterly with industry. We do that with our medical cannabis licensees, and we also do it with our qualified physicians for on the registry side of it. So I think that would be a much better, more open mode of communication than trying to get a task force and getting everybody here and getting a room and things like that. So, you know, that's our feelings on that.
And then maybe you and Andrew could speak to the informality of that. It can just kind of an open invitation, kind of like a opportunity for coffee and a chat with the agencies. It doesn't have to follow then the formal processes that you were just speaking about.
Correct. Yeah, it'd be much more open and a more flowing kind of a conversation.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's put that in as a recommendation, and it seems to be there's concurrence on it. We don't need to go back and get a bill on that. So thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Liam.
Is that also the case
in the original report?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Scotty.
I'm saying I think that should be in the original report. That was one of my recommendations to the consultants was, you know, my main thing is just communication with legislators and offices that create regulations, was to just have that that constant communication with them. But that was in the original report from, I think, when we first sent it to them.
Yeah, and what we just got agreed, Scotty, what we just got clarified is we don't have to have a special ask for that this is going to happen anyway. And maybe we by Friday, let's agree on the first date for that. We can all look at our calendars, and I don't know how they do that informally. If DOH sends, how do you guys do that, Liam? Do you guys send out a doodle to interested parties, or you just set a date every 4 months and whoever can make it shows up? What's the process that you have with your two other groups that you meet with informal?
With our two other groups, we have one with the licensees for MedCan, we have a regular established meeting time that's been the last 2 or 3 years. For the physicians, it's more of we send out invites, set up a date and time. As you guys know, we're as busy as you guys are, so we have to try to find a date and time for that. So it probably would just be, I don't know, maybe a doodle, maybe just we'll announce a date a month or 2 before on our website. Thanks, Rick.
Okay, announce a date a month or 2 before, and we'll do quarterly. And then would it be fair to have the first informal meeting in October?
I don't know. I'd have to look and see. We have a lot going on in October, but yeah, I'll have to
Okay.
get.
But this fall, let's say that we could get an informal commitment from you guys to do something this fall then.
Well, yeah, we have to get approval. Sorry, my team's telling us. I have to get approval before we do some of this, but yeah, it's a great idea and something we'll pursue and something I feel strongly about. But I do have to jump through hoops. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I wonder if you can get that clarified before Friday, because what we're trying to do is find recommendations that we don't have to do legislative fixes for it. And so we obviously don't want to have to drive communication by requiring it through legislation. So maybe if you can come back to us by Friday on clarification on what hoops and who and the potential for moving forward this fall, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll do my best. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Well, that was helpful. Thanks, Brittany. Thanks, Scott. Looks like we're moving forward on that one. Is there anything else overarching kind of recommendations or findings? And if not, then I guess I would like to focus a little bit on the building fiber sector. Okay, with that deafening silence. We talked about last time with regard to building and fiber, especially building, the need to adopt, I think it was the International Residential Code. Hawaii needs to do that, which would allow the perhaps encourage the counties to make the changes they need to make in their individual codes that would allow hemp construction to move forward. I know that there was also mentioned in a report, and I wish Joe was on here right now, that I understand that Maui gave an allowance for about, I want to say it was 5 years, some kind of suspension of certain aspects of the code or some kind of trial period for hemp homes to be built. I think both of those are very important recommendations to include in there, obviously in addition to funding. Is there anything else that you think that we need to be considering and strongly emphasize in the building sector parts of this report? Well, I want to talk about funding then, because funding is something that all the sectors have talked about needed, and obviously building's going to need some. And I think one of the things we have to come to agreement on potentially, I guess we don't have to, we all want funding, but I think if we can get specific recommendations to the state on what that means, that might be helpful. Well, wait a minute. I'm going to backtrack for a second before funding. I'm going to throw out there with regard to building and fiber that one of the things that was actually deleted from the consultant's report, I think from early drafts, was the potential for smaller fiber projects on islands. And I think that was because they felt limited in their search and finding the type of machinery that would support small farm or smaller projects in general. It doesn't matter if it's big or small farm. And I feel like that there are enough people out there that I'm aware of anyway, at least a handful, that would really like to do some fiber projects, but on a small scale. And so as we parallel, I think we can parallel track the recommendations for looking at large facilities, having supporting the building industry, fiber industry, but at the same time, also, it can also be done with smaller potential projects. So that's something I would like to see in there. Is there anyone else that has any thoughts or opinions on that?
Scotty Wong here. I thought that was where the consultants had put in for grants or loans that could be developed for individual companies or organizations to go and apply for it. And I know in my recommendation, my original recommendation to the board, and I think one of our first talks we had was that, you know, companies or organizations, I say orgs because there's nonprofits involved that do hemp training, that can apply for it and then take those grant fundings or loans and then go get the smaller equipment. And it goes to the fact that my machines that I would like to get on a smaller scale may not be the same as the other guy's operation. And rather than the state trying to figure out what is a, you know, one size fit all, or buying multiple and deciding which island it's going to go to and where it's going to go, just give us the funding and we can go get our own machines that we researched, and then go ahead and go get it. And that's after you know, as any grant funding, you write out your entire executive summary and your budgeting and everything, explaining what you're going to get and what you're going to do with it and stuff. You don't just give somebody the money to get something that is going to fail. You know, it's got to be put down on paper, because my machines is different from what other people's machines are, that we would need. You know, just the other day, I think Thursday or Friday, when we were on the call, I mean, I had to jump off the call for 40 minutes because we're brokering a deal for a biochar machine that only one company in the world really makes it, that's EPA approved, you know, and you know, and that's for turning our hemp into biochar and our woody materials. But you know, there's 10 other people that got 10 different other biochar machines that may or may not work. So, you know, the thing is, give us the funding from the state or wherever, and then we can go after our own machines on whatever scale that the budget can afford. That's my opinion.
Oh, thanks, Scotty. I felt similarly in the sense that I think the report was a little too prescriptive on recommending machinery, and that if there were going to be any RFPs led or funding, that the applicant, it should be incumbent upon the applicant to make a case for whatever they were going to do. So I made a note of that. I also think the report said, and I may be wrong, that it focused on value added companies, not necessarily cultivation for the smaller grants, but I'll go back and look at that. So there does seem to be agreement either way that there should be an opportunity for smaller amounts of funding for businesses then in the fiber. Is there anything, Scotty? I'll call on Robert.
No, I agree. I mean, I know I saw grant funding and some loans that was recommended. And then also if the state was going to get machines, that's good too. At least the state is going to get something and start something, you know, like they did with the value added place in Wahiawa. You know, at least something's getting done and purchased. Because like a lot of companies, if they try to apply for grants and stuff, they may not get it. Who knows?
So true. It's super competitive because you're oftentimes going up nationally. And yeah, that facility on Oahu is amazing.
Yeah, and that was my specific recommendation to this task force and the consultant specifically, was if the state of Hawaii is going to create a grant to kickstart this hemp industry, the grant should be made specifically for Hawaii hemp farmers who has experience, who has residents in the islands, that's doing the business, so that we don't have to compete with everybody else. And people from somewhere else doesn't come here and try to apply for our grants. You know, I apply for a lot of grants through our nonprofit side, and I got to compete against Native American Indians. I got to compete against these people and those peoples and the rest of the farmers and these kind of farmers and those farmers. But if you really want to put funding towards Hawaii's hemp industry, the state's got to create a grant, take some of that Department of Education money they didn't spend in the last couple of years, and put 50 million into Hawaii hemp industry and divide that out to just specifically Hawaii hemp farmers. I want to say as simple as that, but I don't roam the legislative halls as much as I used to, but create something like that for us.
You and several other people wanted to see recommendations in there with regard to letting RFPs, that there be criteria that would give weight towards residents and experienced Hawaii hemp farmers. So there seems to be consensus on that for sure. I'm going to call on Brittany, then Grant, then Robert. Go ahead, Brittany.
I just wanted to touch back on a potential issue in the building sector, as far as we have discussed issues with, getting access to banking. And it seems like, being able to have accounts is one thing, and being able to get assistance to make the building materials out of hemp products. But then there's also the whole, like, most people building homes get loans. I mean, not everybody. But if that could be a potential issue, where if the banking side isn't done at the same time as adopting the International Residential Code that allows for hemp building materials, if the banks still won't loan on houses built with those materials because their internal policies haven't been changed, then that could definitely pose an issue there. So I just wanted to make that connection.
That's great. So the recommendation then would be to, it's an issue, a potential issue. And is the recommendation a letter to the industry from this task force, a piece of legislation? What's the recommendation?
Again, if we can somehow address that without legislation, that would be great. I don't know if there's like we try submitting a letter, and if that doesn't work, then the legislation is the backup plan, or what. But it just seems like, even if we get it so these building materials are allowed, if the banks still won't loan on them, it's really gonna hinder that part of the industry.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let on Grant. Oh, he may have had to leave. Grant, I think, was next, but
I'm still there.
okay, great. One of the recommendations in the report was to work with HPM to come up with kit houses. Once they've done that, it kind of marches us through a process that legitimizes homes for financing, in my mind, but I don't know if that's a factual statement. Okay, let's see. Is anything else, Brittany, or should I call on Grant?
No, that was all. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, just very briefly, tangential to exactly building, but applicable to the entire sectors in Hawaii. Recommendations for us to pursue grant funding for Hawaii specific hemp breeding program, because much of the industry difficulty, as most folks can talk about, there's not sufficient cultivars that are equipped to be utilized across the board here. So our company's done a lot of work on breeding proprietary ones that work for dual use needs. But for folks that are working in cannabinoid hemp, as well as a variety of other applications, I think this is a sector agnostic focus that we could all benefit from. And a lot of the difficulty is finding tropical acclimated cultivars that actually perform well in terms of compliance, in terms of yield, in terms of usability. So I think that's a focus that if we want to talk about fiber, food, cannabinoid, whatever the application is, there's going to need to be development of basically a breeding program and seed production to go alongside it to enable these other uses to even happen. So mahalo, that's all I had to add today.
Thanks. That's an overarching recommendation that impacts all sectors, and you're correct. Thanks, Grant. Michaela and then Robert.
I think Robert was first.
Oh, thanks, Michaela. Robert?
Michaela could go first. I'm pretty much just echoing everybody's previous points.
Okay. I was just going to bring up about the building, material side. One way to maybe get around the banking and also to promote the building materials, um, usage of building materials, which the state controls, would be to have the state, as part of the recommendation, the state add in to their green building practices for state of Hawaii construction projects that one of the sustainable materials should include specifically hemp, the word hemp. Right now, it just says locally sourced materials, sustainable materials, recycled sustainable materials. But if it, you know, actually said hemp in it, then that would be a way for the state to promote hemp to be used in the building projects, their construction projects, which are financed by the state banks in Hawaii. So if the state banks wanted to finance these construction projects that the state, are doing that included some type of hemp part in it, they would have to accept the hemp. And then separately from the state, we could go to the banks and they wouldn't be able to say, well, we won't do it, but you do it for the state. Why wouldn't you do it for the private sector? So that could be a way around it for the state to specifically add hemp as one of the sustainable materials that should be used in their construction projects in the state of Hawaii. And that would also help funding because people who invest money, they know that the state could be a potential buyer of the hemp. The state could run a do a construction project that buys the hemp product. Then investors would be more open to providing money to do these things because they would just look at the state's credit rating, and as long as they promote the hemp part in the projects that they build in the state, which they control, and then they can make the decisions themselves.
That's
That's it.
a creative recommendation. I like that. Add hemp as material. I guess there's takeoff lists or some kind of standard material list the state refers to for their capital projects, and have them include hemp in there as a recommendation. And that opens up the pathways. Go ahead.
In the construction projects, they have this green building practices. It's part of their when they go to bid projects out, it's part of it. So they look for projects that are energy efficient. They look for vendors who provide efficiency in energy, water conservation, and then sustainable materials. If they just added hemp into the sustainable materials, that would help push people to actually look at hemp as like hempcrete. If the state was willing to look at hempcrete for certain construction projects they've run, that would open up the market much more quickly than trying to do it, with the private sector. But it's in their building practices. So all the state projects, construction projects the state gets into, there's a green building practices within those within their practices. So it just has to be added in.
Is that the correct term? And I'm not second guessing you. I just got the official term. I mean, because I'm not familiar with this. I just, in terms of the recommendation, if I just want to get the term correct, or is that something we need to research real quick? It's green building practices.
I think you should research it, but there is separately like a green building tax credit that state offers, green building certification programs that the state offers. So I need some research, but I don't know if it's called green building practices, but they should understand what it means. I mean, you need to find out what the specific wording is.
Okay. Well, if that's something you or Scotty can figure out, by Thursday, that'd be great. But we'll still include the recommendation per the wording you've given. I think it's right. Opens up a lot of pathways. Thanks, Michael. Let's see. Is there anything more? Then I'll go to Robert if not.
Yeah, this is Scotty Wong on that part. Yeah, Michele is correct that that would be the best way, and Hawaii is starting to do it. So Department of Transportation, if you pull up their concrete work, they last legislation or two legislations ago, they passed a law about injecting CO2 into concrete, into all of Hawaii's concrete work, highways, vertical, all that stuff. But it's kind of like our biggest thing for the past several years. We're I'm part of the Hawaii carbon sequestration utilization group that pushes sequestering CO2. But they built the spaceship, but there's no launch pad. They got the inject the carbon in there, but they have no technology to do that. But as all of us hemp growers know in this industry for building, I mean, hemp sequesters CO2 from the air. But now it comes back to the building code. Can hempcrete or hemp in these concrete projects support the structures? And we're working with two of Hawaii's biggest concrete companies right now, and the Masons Union, to experiment with this hemp and concrete. It's one of our projects we've been doing, especially with the Masons Union, because those are the guys that we're teaching about creating hempcrete, future proofing, getting ready for the future. But it's in there. If you Google it, you'll find the Department of Transportation, and you may get the terminology from that law that they wrote.
If you guys want to do that, it'd be helpful because I'm really
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up on my phone right now.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, appreciate any help you can lend that way. And thank you for offering that. Fun to hear what's going on in that world with regard to carbon sequestration. Michaela, your hand's up still. Did you have more to contribute to that?
Yes, there's a building code council, which is part of the state of Hawaii Department of Accounting and General Services. And they would have the specific terminology.
I'm going to ask you or Scotty to run that down. I got so many other things I got to put together in the shift report. I can talk about it in general terms, but if one of you guys can run that down, that'd be awesome. And that's another clue on how to get there. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Robert,
Yeah, it'll be decarbonization or decarbonizing Hawaii under green infrastructure ability. Those are like the sound bites. That's the keywords: decarbonization and green infrastructure. But I'll get a lot of it and send it to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you can actually write a rec, Scotty, that just makes my job so much easier because I've got about 100 recommendations to sort through. So thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem. You're talking my field right now.
Yeah, I like that. All right, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll echo all those previous great comments. The green business.hawaii.gov. And once we are able to continue our task force unofficially, we can bring in, there's excellent engineers and architects and masons. I was also talking to some mason friends, and they had also recommended just using HCND and Hawaiian cement. So good on the larger scale, that size. On the smaller versus larger grants, I also really was liking Scotty's original idea of the $500,000 grants. And I was surprised to not see that in the task force consultants report. Instead, they had certain specific RFPs, because I think it's more important that we stay focused on, like Grant mentioned, the birth of this industry is really the farmers, and the farmers know what we need. I've gotten a lot of county, state, and federal grants, and it's good when they have the federal grants. It's usually you have to get something that works within their um, goals of the grant. But it's even better when you have a grant that says you can use it forever you want to use it to make your farm better. And that would be the best way to support the hemp industry. And even with that $500,000 grants that were proposed, you could have so many of those for so much less than just one large scale processor plant. And Kelly, um, she's a large scale processor, and she wasn't too excited about the ideas of the big processors getting grants, but for the smaller scale, like 500,000 or less, that grant could be a big help. And um, that was the main recommendation, is just to have those grants and to stay focused on the smaller scale. Is a lot of the specific equipment identified by the consultants, it has that green tax added to it, and like they recommended licensing. Um, if you just develop it in Hawaii and you meet the ASTM standards, you can make it meet code and you can use it right now. So I would just recommend maybe farmer driven if it's possible to call out the Hawaii Hemp Farmers Association. They've done such a great job so far, and other hemp farmers, and keep the money more towards the farmers than to the builders, because when it's in the hands of the builders, they make the most of the money and they want to pay the least amount of money. That's the reason that there's no forestry in Hawaii. They can import it cheaper. They could sell import to herds cheaper. But if it's the farmer and it's more vertically integrated, or it's a really fair co-op, then the farmers can actually make enough money. And for a lot of these hemp products, it's just like mud. It's not that hard, but then master masonry, that's another level. So Hawaii can become the master masons and kind of a center point that all the other hemp experts from around the world can kind of gather, and we can be a STEM curriculum and university source of knowledge to export the knowledge.
So if I hear you, and you're kind of building on what Scotty was saying with regard to the smaller grants for businesses, but the recommendation coming from that would be that we suggest that there be criteria for emphasizing local folks with experience. And in particular, I'm hearing farmers, and then potentially a weighted criteria in favor of identifying how you're going to create a vertically integrated economy or closed loop economy, or where there's more opportunity for more people. That may or may not be a co-op, but that was an example of achieving that goal. The goal is moving the money around in Hawaii and lifting more people up with hemp. Did I get that right? If not, please tell me.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll go back and listen to the recording too. Sometimes if I rephrase it in the moment, it's just deeper understanding for myself. So thank you. It sounds like I'm just repeating what you guys have said. There's a reason for that. We've been at it for an hour. Is there anything else with regard to building? I highly encourage all you guys to please email me specific recommendations. Even if you've listed them here today, it's If I get them in my inbox, it just ensures for sure that they're gonna get the report that you'll hopefully get to review Wednesday morning. Anything else with regard to construction? There's been some great creative recommendations thrown out there. All right. Are there any other recommendations with regard to any of the other sectors? And I'm gonna leave cannabinoid out because I've gotten a ton of recommendations from folks, and I think that we've already used a lot of the time to talk about the cannabinoid side of things. So if there's anything with regard to fuel or food that people want to discuss, let's open the floor to that. Obviously, Kelly and Grant have the greatest expertise that I've seen so far in our task force with that. I don't know if there's anything that you want to emphasize. You've already sent in recommendations and the suggested rewrite for the energy chapters, Grant. So I thank you for that. But if there's anything you'd like to share at this point, otherwise we can just move along.
No, I think with fuel and all that stuff, I think it's more of a company operational thing rather than a state task force, thing that has to be discussed. I think it's more the farming side, which we covered. So, and I know for my thing with my food, fiber, feed, fuel recommendation was all given to the consultants early on, and we can stand on that. And I know, like, later on, I know there's a co-op that's being created right now as we speak. I know there's a guy and an attorney working on it for hemp farmers, so that may come out later because I heard the word co-op come out. And our big thing is always to lift people, especially in the general agriculture hemp side. So a lot of the stuff that I heard so far seems good for the future of things that are happening behind the scenes. So I think we look good on top of what we're talking about for the general construction.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, what I'd love to do is just maybe conclude the meeting early if we're allowed to, and then I can just start writing more. Unless and we can keep going as long as folks would like to go. If there's broad arching concerns, findings that you'd like to talk about, or something specific to a sector. From my perspective, I got a lot still to do before Wednesday morning. Are we allowed to conclude early, June?
Yeah. Yes. There's no more discussion.
There's just a lot that's been emailed to me that needs to be, and I need to go back to the meetings. Go ahead.
We have one attendee. We'll just ask first if from the public is going to testify.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see anyone from the public. Thank you.
It's okay.
No, it's okay. They didn't have their hand raised. I guess right now I'll ask if that member of the public who's joining, Chun and KB, if you wanted to say anything, if you wanted to testify, you could click the raise hand button right now.
I don't even see him on my screen. Would that be something that we would see, or only you folks see in the Department of Ag IT side?
I think
In the
you
chat
would.
box,
Yeah, it's
there's
participants.
two participants and attendees.
Yeah, because you probably see panelists, but then there's also attendees. They didn't raise their hand, so I would say
Okay.
we're good to go.
Okay, yeah, I'm still not seeing, there is no chat box function.
Sorry,
And
yeah,
then-
not participants.
Participants, okay. Okay,
And then under participants, there's panelists and then attendees.
gotcha. Okay, well, thank you, whoever's tuned in. Appreciate you being there, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Do we need a motion to adjourn early?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Gail, if there's no objection from the members. And we can adjourn.
Thank you. Please get your comments in via email. Feel free to call too, if that's easier. And thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, DOH.